You're watching Cover to Cover, our guide to the Sikh and Punjabi books that you need to read. This week we're introducing Rural Development in Punjab, a success story going astray, edited by Autar, Dhesi and Gurmail Singh. This book that we're looking at is a hardbound edition that was published in 2008 by Routledge. The two editors of this book, Autar Singh, Dhesi and Gurmail Singh, are both seasoned academics covering the fields of society, of agriculture, of development, and have a specific interest in the Punjab. Both academics were based in the Punjab and trained there, although the former has travelled to other places here in the United Kingdom too. In this compilation of research papers and essays about the rural development of the Punjab, they have gathered together numerous work by many different academics and scholars, all instigated at a seminar that took place in the subcontinent in 2004. Some 4 years later, this particular work is born, and ever since it has been a go-to Bible for the likes of myself to try and learn a little bit more about how Punjab's agriculture and the agrarian policies of both the Punjab state government and the national government, on the other hand, have been taking Punjab down the road that we all know it is in today. So let's take a look inside the book, and as you'd expect from an academic text, this has got everything plus some that you'd want for your money's worth. Taking a look at the contents, you can start to see the incredible depth of articles that we have. They are broken up into 5 separate sections. As you would expect from a text like this, we have opening acknowledgements, an introduction to the whole book and all of the different works that are presented herein. And we have then some additional helpful spaces. We have a list of acronyms and abbreviations, which is incredibly helpful when you start looking at the technical details of agriculture and agrarian policies in the Punjab. There is a list of tables and figures. There are then some notes on the contributors that have put forward all of these different articles, and of course there is a very, very helpful index. Each chapter does end with notes and references, as you'd expect. This is the type of book that you are not going to pick up and read from cover to cover. It is certainly not a book where you are going to read every single research paper either. It is a compiled work from which you are going to cherry pick the articles and the subject matter that you have the most interest in. There are some familiar names that have presented some of the papers that make it into this work. For those of us here from the United Kingdom, you'll recognize the names Shinder Singh Thandi and Darshan Singh Tatla. So what are those different subject areas into which each of the papers falls? The first section is rural development and analytical frame. The second section, agriculture, development and challenges. The third section, water resources, issues and responses. The fourth section, agro-industrial development. The fifth section, human resource development. And then the final 6th section, overseas Punjabis and rural development. This is a sometimes very, very technical book, and that is to be expected because some of the papers were very, very specific. That means that for the everyday reader like myself, a non-academic and somebody who has a vested interest in the field of agriculture but not one of passion or one of great knowledge, it can sometimes seem a little bit dry, and that's me being as kind as I possibly can. I have, over the last decade, been through this entire work at different times, so I have read every single article here. But to suggest that I understand all of the material I was reading would be a misnomer. So who is this book aimed at? Well, it is for absolutely anybody who is an academic that has an interest in South Asian agrarian policy, in South Asian international development, and or South Asian diaspora and how they connect back to homeland, their place in the Punjab. This is also for any academic that is writing about the Punjab's economy or the Punjab's agriculture and how it's actually moving on. So you don't have to be somebody in those fields, but if it's something you're touching upon, this has to be on your desk. The fact that it's published by Routledge gives it an air of gravity for a lot of people, and that can sometimes reflect itself in the price. But what you will also find is that this work is reprinted by Singh brothers, and so it is available directly from them in the Punjab at a very, very helpful, inexpensive cost. There is, of course, a huge amount for people to think and say about Punjab's policy, the farming situation that exists there, which has most recently hit the headlines once again. What a work like this does is help you to go beyond the story, beyond the rhetoric, and start to get to grips with what is the problem in the area. And the subtitle to the book says that in a nutshell. It is a success story going astray. Of course, it is questionable how much of a success story it was in the first place, and what those success measurements actually were. There is some level of disconnect between some of the work in this book and the people on the ground and the realities that they have to face and their existence as a whole. But that's just one or two exceptions. Generally, this was a great piece of work. Now, why am I saying was? Well, because it is now, to some extent, dated. This is a work that was compiled over a decade ago, and the work within it presented, those papers, were first presented over a decade and a half ago. The situation in the Punjab has gone much further downhill than at that particular time. And so what I needed are much more radical solutions than some of those that are being presented here. Of course, the massive brain drain of people, of resources, and of the relationship between people who have left the Punjab and who still have some connection or relationship with it is all covered in here. And I found that to be the most relevant areas to read in a work like this that might be relevant to what is taking place today as we are well and truly into the 21st century. Overall, Rural Development in Punjab, edited by Autar, Dhesi and Gurmail Singh, is the kind of work that I would hope so many more people who have an interest in the Punjab would own a copy and, of course, read and digest and discuss. But the reality is that that's not really going to happen. And as I said, the amount of technical information in it, the amount of context required to appreciate the things being said, and of course, an appreciation of the ground reality in the Punjab today in 2020 means that a lot of this will be lost on casual readers. If you consider yourself a dedicated viewer of Cover to Cover, somebody who is passionate about the affairs of the Punjab, particularly with relation to development, to economic policy, and of course agrarian policy, then this is a book that you should be looking to pick up and read from time to time. Certainly to get a better grasp of that information and where we're headed, but to provide you with some of the names and references of so much work that has been done in this field over the years. But of course, we want to know what you think, so please leave us your comments below and share your thoughts on Rural Development in Punjab, edited by Autar Singh, Dhesi and Gurmail Singh. Make sure you subscribe to our Naujawani YouTube channel. We want to see you here every single week on Cover to Cover, our guide to the Sikh and Punjabi books that you need to read.